The text message that would change Madeline Cooper's life forever was sent at 8:42 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. Her fingers trembled as she typed, her eyes darting between her phone and her 6-year-old son, Jake, who lay in the hospital bed beside her, his small chest rising and falling in fitful sleep. Dr. Richards, Jake's fever has spiked to 103 again. The nurse gave him medication an hour ago, but it's not working. I'm really worried. Should I call for the doctor on duty? Madeline hit send and closed her eyes briefly, the exhaustion of 3 sleepless nights washing over her. The sterile hospital room with its beeping monitors and harsh fluorescent lighting had become her world. She tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear and rubbed her tired eyes, smudging what remained of yesterday's mascara. When her phone buzzed seconds later, she grabbed it eagerly, then frowned at the response. I think you have the wrong number. I'm not Dr. Richards. Madeline's heart sank. In her panic, she must have misdialed the pediatrician's after-hours number. I'm so sorry, she typed back quickly. My son is in the hospital, and I'm a bit overwhelmed. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. No apology necessary. Is your son all right? Do you need help getting the right medical attention? The unexpected kindness from a stranger made tears spring to Madeline's eyes. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, matching her inner turmoil. The nurses are here, but his doctor isn't responding. I'm just a worried mom. What hospital are you at? Came the swift reply. Madeline hesitated, but was too tired to question the stranger's interest. Boston Children's. He has pneumonia that's not responding to the first round of antibiotics. Ask for Dr. Eleanor Patel. Tell her Jackson sent you. She's the best pediatric pulmonologist in the Northeast. Madeline stared at her phone in disbelief. Who was this person? Before she could respond, another message appeared. And tell the nurse at the station that your son needs to be seen now. Don't take no for an answer. Something in the authoritative tone gave Madeline a surge of courage. She tucked the blanket around Jake's shoulders, adjusting his favorite dinosaur plushie under his arm, and walked determinedly to the nurse's station, where she repeated the stranger's instructions almost verbatim. The nurse's eyebrows shot up at the mention of Jackson, and within 20 minutes, a gentle-faced woman in her 50s was examining Jake, ordering new tests and changing his antibiotics. Your son has a particularly resistant strain, Doctor. Patel explained, her voice warm but professional. We'll try a different approach, and may I ask how you know Jackson? I don't actually know him, Madeline admitted. I texted the wrong number and he responded with your name. Dr. Patel's expression shifted to one of surprise, then understanding. Well, you're fortunate. Jackson doesn't give out my name lightly. She patted Madeline's hand. Try to get some rest. We'll take good care of Jake. By morning, Jake's fever had broken. As he watched cartoons, his blue eyes, so like his father's, brighter than they'd been in days, Madeline finally had a moment to text her mysterious benefactor. I don't know who you are, but thank you. Dr. Patel changed his treatment and he's already improving. I'm glad to hear it. Kids should always come first. Madeline's curiosity got the better of her. May I ask who you are and how you know Dr. Patel? There was a long pause before the reply came. Jackson Reed. I'm on the hospital's board of trustees. How is your son doing this morning? Madeline's jaw dropped. Jackson Reed was one of Boston's most famous residents, a tech billionaire whose face occasionally graced business magazines. She'd assumed Jackson was a first name, not realizing she'd been texting with one of the wealthiest men in Massachusetts. Much better, thanks to you. I can't believe I accidentally texted Jackson Reed. Just Jackson is fine, and accidents sometimes turn out for the best. What's your son's name? Jake, he's 6. He's been fighting this pneumonia for almost 2 weeks. Tough kid. Like his mom, I'm guessing. Madeline smiled despite herself. More like stubborn. Both of us. Their text conversation continued sporadically throughout the day. Jackson asked thoughtful questions about Jake's condition, and Madeline found herself sharing details of their life. How she'd been raising Jake alone since her husband Daniel walked out when Jake was just a baby. How she juggled her job as a graphic designer with single parenthood, and how this hospitalization was stretching her finances to the breaking point. I've had to take unpaid leave from work, she confessed. My boss is understanding, but we're a small design firm and there's only so much flexibility they can offer. What kind of design work do you do? Jackson asked. Mostly branding and website design for local businesses. Nothing glamorous, but I love the creativity of it. Jake likes to sit next to me and draw while I work sometimes. An artist in the making. Does he have other interests? Madeline smiled at her sleeping son. Dinosaurs, space, and anything involving mud. Typical 6-year-old boy stuff. I'm sorry to dump all this on you, she wrote after a particularly long message. You must have far more important things to do than listen to a stranger's problems. Actually, I'm sitting in an airport lounge watching my flight to Tokyo get delayed. Your messages are the most interesting part of my day. Madeline felt a flutter in her chest at his response. It seemed impossible that someone like Jackson Reed would find her ordinary life interesting. She glanced at herself in the reflection of the darkened hospital window. Tired eyes, messy ponytail, wearing the same sweater she'd thrown on 3 days ago when Jake's fever had first spiked. She certainly didn't feel like someone who should be texting with a billionaire. 3 days later, Jake was discharged from the hospital. As Madeline gathered their belongings, stuffing pajamas and coloring books into her worn tote bag, a hospital administrator appeared in the doorway. Ms. Cooper, I have some good news. Your hospital bill has been taken care of. What? That's impossible. My insurance only covers a portion. A donor has covered all expenses not addressed by your insurance. It's been handled anonymously, but I'm authorized to tell you that you can focus on your son's recovery without financial concerns. Madeline sank into the chair beside Jake's bed, her mind immediately jumping to Jackson. It had to be him. But why would a billionaire businessman take such an interest in her and Jake? Mom, can we go home now? Jake asked, clutching his dinosaur toy. The color had returned to his cheeks, and his voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Yes, sweetheart, we're going home. That evening, after settling Jake in his own bed at home with a bowl of his favorite chicken soup, Madeline texted Jackson again. Their small apartment felt cozy after the sterile hospital environment, but the stack of bills on her kitchen counter reminded her of the reality she'd temporarily escaped. Was it you? Who paid our hospital bill? Let's just say I believe in investing in good people. How's Jake doing at home? Madeline wanted to press further, but decided to respect his apparent wish for anonymity regarding the payment. Much better. Happier in his own bed. Thank you doesn't seem adequate for everything you've done. I've done very little, but if you really want to thank me, maybe you and Jake would join me for dinner once he's fully recovered. I'll be back from Tokyo next week. Madeline's heart skipped a beat. Was Jackson Reed asking her on a date? No, surely he was just being kind, perhaps wanting to meet the little boy he'd helped. We'd like that, she responded simply. What Madeline couldn't know was that across the world, Jackson Reed sat in a luxurious Tokyo hotel suite, staring at his phone with an unusual sense of anticipation. For the first time in years, he had cancelled meetings to make room in his schedule. A dinner with a struggling single mother and her son. Beside him on the desk lay a newspaper featuring his own face, the headline reading, Reed Industries CEO misses key Tokyo summit, cites personal emergency. The article speculated about potential health issues or company troubles, but Jackson simply smiled as he typed one more message to Madeline. I'm looking forward to it more than you know. Sometimes priorities become clear when you least expect it. What neither of them realized was that the connection formed through those accidental text messages would lead them down a path neither had anticipated, one that would challenge everything Jackson thought he valued and offer Madeline a chance at happiness she'd long ago stopped believing in. But first they would both face unexpected obstacles that would test this fragile new bond between them. The restaurant Jackson had chosen for their dinner was upscale, but not intimidating. A waterfront establishment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Madeline smoothed down her navy blue dress, the nicest one she owned, and helped Jake straighten his little bow tie. Remember what we talked about, buddy? Best behavior tonight, okay? Jake nodded solemnly. Because Mr. Jackson is important, and he helped me get better. That's right. And because it's good manners no matter who we're having dinner with. Madeline knelt to his level, adjusting his collar. You look very handsome. Do you think Mr. Jackson likes dinosaurs? Jake asked, his eyes wide with hope. Madeline laughed. I don't know, but you can certainly ask him. The maitre d' approached them with a deferential smile. Ms. Cooper, Mr. Reed is waiting for you. Please follow me. As they were led through the restaurant, Madeline felt eyes on them, whispers following in their wake. Jackson Reed was clearly a known figure here. When they reached a private dining area separated from the main restaurant by elegant glass panels, Madeline saw him for the first time. The business magazine photos hadn't done him justice. Jackson Reed stood as they approached, his tall frame commanding attention without effort. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his eyes, a striking shade of grey, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority, but none of the arrogance she had expected. "Madeline," he said, his voice warm and familiar after their text exchanges. "And you must be Jake." He extended his hand to the boy first, a gesture that immediately endeared him to Madeline. Jake shook his hand with the exaggerated formality of a child. "Thank you for helping me when I was sick, Mr. Jackson. It was my pleasure, and please just call me Jackson." He pulled out chairs for both of them. "I hope you like seafood. This place makes the best clam chowder in Boston." Jake's face lit up. "That's my favorite. Mom makes it too, but she says hers isn't as good as the restaurant's." Jackson laughed, glancing at Madeline with amusement. "Well, I'll have to be the judge of that someday." The casual implication that there might be future meetings hung in the air, and Madeline felt her cheeks warm. Up close, Jackson was even more charismatic than she had imagined. But there was something else beneath the polished exterior. A hint of weariness around his eyes, perhaps, or a guardedness that intrigued her. Throughout dinner, Jackson proved remarkably attentive to Jake, answering his endless questions about boats, visible from their window, dinosaurs, he knew a surprising amount, and his private jet, which fascinated Jake to no end. He spoke to the boy as if his opinions mattered, never talking down to him or dismissing his childish observations. When Jake went to explore the dessert cart with the friendly waiter who had offered to show him the options, Madeline finally had a moment alone with Jackson. "You're very good with him," she said. "Do you have children of your own?" A shadow crossed Jackson's face. "No, it never happened for me." He took a sip of his wine. "My work became my life, and relationships took a back seat. I find that hard to believe." "Surely women must be lining up for a chance with Boston's most eligible bachelor." Jackson gave her a wry smile. "Dating is different when you have money. You never know if someone is interested in you or your bank account." He paused, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. "That's what was so refreshing about our first conversation. You had no idea who I was. You were just a mother trying to help her son." Madeline nodded, understanding dawning. "It must be lonely sometimes." "It can be," he admitted, then quickly shifted the conversation. "Tell me more about your design work. I looked up your portfolio online. You're talented." Madeline blinked in surprise. "You researched me?" "Of course. Wouldn't you have done the same?" She laughed. "I did Google you, but there's a lot more information available about Jackson Reed than about Madeline Cooper." "And what did you learn about me?" His expression was unreadable. "That you built your tech company from scratch. That you're worth billions. That you're known for being ruthless in business but generous with charity." She paused. "That your parents died when you were young." Jackson's jaw tightened slightly. "All true. Anything else?" "That you were engaged once, about 5 years ago, to a French model, but it ended suddenly. The tabloids had a field day speculating why." "The tabloids rarely get anything right," he said, his tone cooling noticeably. Before Madeline could respond, Jake returned, excitedly describing the chocolate lava cake he'd selected. The moment of tension passed, but Madeline filed away Jackson's reaction for future consideration. As dessert was served, Jackson's phone buzzed repeatedly. He glanced at it apologetically. "I'm sorry, I need to take this business emergency. Excuse me for just a moment." While he stepped away, Jake leaned toward his mother. "Mom, I really like Mr. Jackson. He knows all about T-Rex teeth, and he said maybe he could take us on his boat sometime." "Did he now?" Madeline raised her eyebrows, wondering if Jackson was in the habit of making promises to impress people. "We'll see, honey. Mr. Jackson is very busy." When Jackson returned, his expression was troubled. "I apologize for the interruption. There's a situation at one of our overseas offices." He hesitated. "Actually, I was hoping to ask you something, Madeline. It's rather unorthodox." "What is it?" "I have to fly to London tomorrow morning. A major client is threatening to pull out of a deal that's been in the works for months. I'd normally send my VP, but they're specifically asking for me." He took a breath. "I know this is completely inappropriate and probably sounds insane, but would you consider coming with me? You and Jake? All expenses paid, of course." Madeline stared at him. "To London? Tomorrow? Jackson, we barely know each other." I know. But hear me out." He leaned forward earnestly. "The client I'm meeting with is a luxury hotel chain. They're unhappy with the branding concepts my team developed. When I saw your portfolio, your work for that boutique hotel in Providence, I thought you might have exactly the fresh perspective we need." "You want me to work for you?" Madeline was incredulous. "As a consultant, yes. I'm willing to pay your standard rate, plus a bonus, if the client approves your concepts." He glanced at Jake, who was happily demolishing his chocolate cake, oblivious to the adults' conversation. "And I thought Jake might enjoy seeing London. My apartment there has plenty of room, and my assistant can arrange for a qualified nanny during our meetings." Madeline's mind raced. The practical part of her knew this was insane, flying to London with a man she'd just met, no matter how charming or apparently trustworthy. But the designer in her recognized an incredible opportunity. And the mother in her thought of how Jake's eyes would light up at the adventure. "I'd need to check with his doctor," she said slowly. "He's still recovering." Jackson nodded eagerly. "Of course. Dr. Patel can examine him tomorrow morning before we leave. If she gives the all-clear, my jet can have us in London by dinner time." "Your jet," Madeline repeated faintly. The reality of Jackson's wealth, which had seemed abstract until now, suddenly hit her. "This is crazy." "Sometimes the best opportunities are," Jackson replied, his gray eyes intense. "What do you say?" Before Madeline could answer, a striking blonde woman approached their table, her expression a mixture of surprise and calculation. "Jackson, I thought that was you." Her voice was honey-sweet with an undercurrent of steel. She was impeccably dressed in designer clothing that made Madeline's department store dress feel suddenly inadequate. Jackson's face froze for an instant before he stood. "Victoria, what a surprise, isn't it?" Her gaze swept over Madeline and Jake with barely concealed curiosity. "I didn't realize you were entertaining." "Victoria Matthews, this is Madeline Cooper and her son Jake. Madeline is a talented graphic designer I'm considering for a project." The way he emphasized the professional nature of their relationship made Madeline's stomach twist uncomfortably. Victoria extended a manicured hand to Madeline. "How lovely." Jackson has always had an eye for talent. The pause was deliberate, the implication clear. "Victoria is my ex-fiancée," Jackson explained to Madeline, his tone carefully neutral. "Former fiancée, current board member," Victoria corrected with a practiced smile. "My father and Jackson go way back. Practically family, aren't we, darling?" Jake, sensing the tension, pressed closer to Madeline's side. She placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "We were just finishing up," Jackson said, his jaw tight. "It was good seeing you, Victoria." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Likewise. Don't forget the charity gala next weekend, Jackson. Father is counting on your usual generous donation." She glanced at Madeline again. "Perhaps your new colleague would like to attend as well?" After she glided away, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Jake, with a child's perceptiveness, asked, "Mom, why was that lady mad at Mr. Jackson?" "She wasn't mad, sweetie," Madeline said automatically, though they all knew it wasn't true. Jackson sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry about that. Victoria and it's complicated. Her father, Harold Matthews, is my largest investor and the chairman of my board. Our engagement was as much a business arrangement as anything else." "You don't owe me an explanation," Madeline said quickly. "Maybe not, but I'd like to give you one." His eyes met hers. "Especially if you're considering coming to London." The evening ended shortly after, with Jackson escorting them to a waiting car service he'd arranged. As they said goodbye on the sidewalk, he knelt to Jake's level. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Jake. I hope I'll see you again soon." Jake beamed. "Can we really go on your airplane?" Jackson glanced up at Madeline, the question in his eyes. "I'll think about London," she promised. "And I'll let you know in the morning. That's all I ask." He stood, his hand briefly touching hers. "Good night, Madeline." As the car pulled away, Jake chatted excitedly about airplanes and London and Mr. Jackson's cool watch. Madeline half listened, her mind whirling with doubts and possibilities. Something about Jackson Reed fascinated her. His kindness to Jake, his appreciation of her work, the glimpses of vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. But Victoria's appearance had been a stark reminder of the world Jackson inhabited, a world of wealth, power, and complex business relationships far removed from Madeline's modest life. If she accepted his London offer, would she be stepping into an opportunity or a complication she wasn't prepared to handle? Back in her apartment, after tucking Jake into bed, Madeline pulled out her laptop. If she was going to make this decision, she needed more information about Jackson Reed and about Victoria Matthews and her powerful father. What she discovered would force her to question everything she thought she knew about the billionaire who had entered their lives through a mistaken text message. The London sky was the color of brushed pewter as Jackson's private jet touched down at Heathrow. Despite her initial reservations, Madeline had accepted his offer after Dr. Patel had given Jake a clean bill of health and encouraged the trip, suggesting the change of scenery might be good for both mother and son. What Dr. Patel didn't know, what no one knew, was what Madeline had discovered during her late-night research. Jackson Reed wasn't just a self-made billionaire. He was a man with secrets. As they descended the airplane steps, Madeline clutched Jake's hand a little tighter than necessary. The boy was practically vibrating with excitement, having spent the flight being spoiled by the attentive flight attendant and marveling at the plane's luxurious amenities. "Mom, look at that car." Jake pointed at the gleaming black Range Rover waiting on the tarmac. Jackson chuckled, placing a gentle hand on Jake's shoulder. "That's our ride. London traffic can be a beast, but we should make it to the apartment in time for an early dinner." The drive into the city was filled with Jake's enthusiastic questions about every landmark they passed. Jackson answered each one patiently, his knowledge of London's history impressive. Madeline remained quieter, watching the interaction between her son and the billionaire with mixed emotions. Jackson's Mayfair apartment occupied the entire top floor of a historic building overlooking Green Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the London skyline, and the interior was a tasteful blend of modern luxury and classic British elements. "This is where you live?" Jake breathed, his eyes wide as he took in the spacious living area. "One of my places," Jackson said with a casual shrug that reminded Madeline just how different their worlds were. "I stay here when business brings me to London, which is fairly often." An elegant middle-aged woman with a warm smile greeted them as they entered. "Mr. Reed, welcome back. Everything is prepared as you requested." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. This is Ms. Cooper and her son Jake, our special guests." Jackson made the introductions. "Mrs. Winters manages the apartment and keeps everything running smoothly. She's also an excellent cook if you're hungry after the flight." "Starving," Jake announced, making the adults laugh. Mrs. Winters led them on a tour of the apartment. Jake would have his own room with a view of the park and a bookshelf stocked with children's books. Madeline's suite adjoined his, with a connecting door for her peace of mind. Jackson's master suite was located on the opposite end of the apartment, a fact that both relieved and strangely disappointed Madeline. "Tomorrow morning we meet with the Claridge Hotel Group at 10, Jackson explained, as they settled in for dinner at the elegant dining table. "Their CEO, Lawrence Pembroke, is an old-school hospitality magnate who believes luxury should look and feel a certain way. My team created branding concepts that were too modern for his taste, and now we're at an impasse." "And you think I can help bridge that gap?" Madeline asked, still uncertain why he'd brought her into this high-stakes business situation. Jackson nodded. "Your portfolio shows an exceptional ability to blend traditional elegance with contemporary appeal, exactly what Claridge needs." He looked at her intently. "I wouldn't have brought you here if I didn't believe in your talent, Madeline." She felt warmth spread through her at his confidence, but couldn't shake the shadow of her discoveries. During dinner, she observed him closely, looking for signs of the man she'd read about in those buried news stories, the ruthless businessman who had allegedly driven a rival to bankruptcy through questionable tactics, the controlling ex-fiancée Victoria had hinted at in a revealing magazine interview. After dinner, Mrs. Winters offered to show Jake the model train set in the study, leaving Madeline and Jackson alone with their coffee. "So you've been quiet," Jackson observed, his grey eyes searching her face. "Second thoughts about coming?" Madeline took a deep breath. "I found some articles about you last night, about Victoria's father's company, Matthew's Hospitality, and how it was mysteriously saved from bankruptcy right around the time you two got engaged." Jackson's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I see." And then there was the story about Robert Chandler, your former partner who lost everything when you— When I what? Jackson interrupted, his voice deceptively calm. Go on, I'd like to hear what the article said. When you allegedly used inside information to outmaneuver him, taking control of the company you'd built together and forcing him out. Madeline met his gaze steadily. He later died by suicide, according to the reports. Jackson set down his coffee cup with precise control. Is that why you came to London, to investigate me? No, I came because you offered my son an adventure and me a professional opportunity. She leaned forward. But I'm not naive, Jackson. I needed to know who I was getting involved with. And now you think you know. It wasn't a question. I think there's more to the story, she countered. I think if you were truly the shark those articles painted you as, you wouldn't have helped a stranger and her sick child. Something flickered in Jackson's eyes, surprise perhaps or relief. Then his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, frowning. It's late. We should probably get some rest before tomorrow's meeting. He stood abruptly. Good night, Madeline. She watched him retreat to his study, closing the door firmly behind him. Despite the luxurious surroundings, Madeline felt a chill. Had she made a terrible mistake coming here? Was she putting herself and Jake in an untenable position? The next morning, a car took them to the Claridge Group's London headquarters. Jake had been left in Mrs. Winter's capable care, excited about the promised visit to the Natural History Museum later. As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Jackson was all business, briefing Madeline on the key players they would meet. Lawrence Pembroke is old money British, very traditional. His daughter, Charlotte, is more progressive but defers to her father. The company's marketing director, Philip Bennett, is the one who initially approached us about rebranding their boutique hotel line. Madeline nodded, mentally reviewing the portfolio she'd prepared on the flight. And you've worked with them before? Indirectly. Matthews Hospitality, Victoria's family business, has partnered with them on several properties in Asia. Jackson straightened his already perfect tie. Which reminds me, Victoria might be here today. What, you didn't mention that? I didn't know until this morning. Apparently, Matthews Hospitality is considering investing in Claridge's expansion. His jaw tightened. It's not a coincidence. Before Madeline could ask what he meant, the elevator doors opened and they were greeted by an impeccably dressed receptionist who led them to a large conference room. 4 people were already seated around the polished table, and distinguished older man who could only be Lawrence Pembroke, a woman in her 30s with his same aristocratic features, a nervous-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses, and Victoria Matthews, who looked even more striking than she had at the restaurant. Jackson, how lovely to see you again so soon, Victoria purred, rising to air-kiss his cheek. Her eyes flicked dismissively over Madeline. And you brought your consultant. Lawrence Pembroke stood, extending his hand first to Jackson, then to Madeline. Ms. Cooper, I understand you're a specialist in boutique hotel branding. We're eager to see your ideas. The meeting began with presentations from the Claridge team about their vision and concerns. As Madeline listened, she realized that the conflict was more fundamental than Jackson had explained. Pembroke wasn't just resistant to modern design, he was fighting to preserve his family's legacy in an evolving market. When it was her turn to present, Madeline approached it from a different angle than she'd planned. Mr. Pembroke, your hotels represent a tradition of excellence spanning generations, she began. What if instead of replacing that heritage with contemporary design, we celebrated it? Let me show you some concepts that honor your history while appealing to today's luxury travelers. The slides she displayed showed elegant, classic designs with subtle modern touches. Exactly the blend of old and new that Pembroke had been struggling to articulate. His face transformed as he paged through her portfolio. This is precisely what I've been trying to explain, he said, looking accusingly at his marketing director. Tradition reinterpreted, not abandoned. By the meeting's end, Pembroke was enthusiastically discussing implementation timelines. Charlotte was taking notes on Madeline's suggestions, and even Victoria seemed grudgingly impressed. Only Philip Bennett appeared unhappy, shooting occasional glares at Jackson when he thought no one was looking. As they prepared to leave, Pembroke invited them to a dinner at his club that evening to finalize details. Bring your son, he added warmly to Madeline. My grandson is about his age. They could keep each other company. In the car returning to the apartment, Jackson was jubilant. "That was brilliant. You completely turned Pembroke around." Madeline smiled, feeling the professional satisfaction of a job well done. "I just listened to what he was really saying. He doesn't hate modern design. He hates feeling like his legacy is being erased." Jackson studied her with new respect. "You're very good at reading people. Most designers are. It's part of the job." She paused. "Speaking of reading people, what's the real story with Philip Bennett? He seemed unusually hostile." Jackson's expression clouded. "You noticed that too? Philip used to work for me years ago. He left under difficult circumstances. He looked out the window at the passing London streets. There's something off about this whole situation. Victoria showing up, Philip's involvement. What are you saying?" "I'm not sure yet." He turned back to her, his grey eyes troubled. "But I think we're being set up, and I need to figure out why before it's too late." When they returned to the apartment, they found Jake and Mrs. Winters baking cookies in the kitchen, flour dusting their clothes, and laughter filling the space. The domestic scene momentarily pushed aside the business concerns, and Jackson's face softened as he watched Jake proudly show off his culinary creation. "Mr. Jackson, we made cookies shaped like dinosaurs. Mrs. Winters has special cutters." "They look ferocious," Jackson said seriously, accepting a slightly misshapen T-Rex. "Almost too scary to eat." "No, silly. They're for eating," Jake giggled. Madeline watched the interaction with a tightness in her chest. In just days, Jackson had become important to Jake, and if she was honest with herself, to her as well. But the questions raised by her research and the strange dynamics at the meeting left her uneasy. While Jake continued baking with Mrs. Winters, Jackson led Madeline to his study. "There's something I need to tell you before tonight's dinner," he said, his voice grave as he closed the door. "Something about my past, about Robert Chandler and Victoria's father." "I'm listening," Madeline said quietly. Jackson took a deep breath. "Robert wasn't just my business partner. He was my best friend since college. We built Reed Technologies together. When we decided to go public, we needed major investors. Harold Matthews, Victoria's father, offered the capital we needed, but with conditions." His expression darkened. "Harold wanted control. When I refused, he threatened to back our biggest competitor instead." "So what happened?" "Robert panicked. Behind my back, he made a deal with Harold, company secrets in exchange for personal financial security." Jackson's eyes reflected old pain. "I didn't force Robert out. He betrayed the company, but I never exposed what he did. I let people believe I was the villain because the truth would have destroyed his reputation completely." "And his suicide?" Madeline asked softly. "The guilt consumed him. He left me a letter confessing everything." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "By then, Harold had his hooks in our company. The engagement to Victoria was his idea, a way to unite our families and secure his influence permanently. Why did you agree?" "I was trying to protect what Robert and I had built." Jackson's voice was hollow. "It was the biggest mistake of my life." As Madeline processed this revelation, Jackson's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's Pembroke," he answered, listening intently, his expression growing increasingly alarmed. "I understand. We'll be there." He hung up, his face pale. "What is it?" Madeline asked. "Change of plans. Pembroke wants to meet at his country estate immediately, not at the club tonight. He says there's an urgent matter to discuss regarding our contract." "That sounds ominous." "It is." Jackson's eyes met hers. "Especially since I just received information that Philip Bennett met privately with Victoria and Harold Matthews yesterday. I think whatever they're planning is happening now." "Should we cancel?" "No, if we don't go, we lose the deal for certain." He hesitated. "But I don't want Jake involved in this. Would you be comfortable leaving him with Mrs. Winters while we handle this?" Madeline considered. "I'll ask him. If he's happy staying here, I'll come with you." Jake, it turned out, was delighted to continue his London adventure with Mrs. Winters, who had promised to show him how to make proper English scones next. With her son happily settled, Madeline joined Jackson for the drive to Pembroke's estate in the Cotswolds. During the journey, Jackson received a series of urgent texts from his London office. "Something's happening with our stock," he said grimly. "It's dropping rapidly with no clear cause." As they pulled through the gates of Pembroke's magnificent manor house, Madeline suddenly gasped, pointing to another car in the driveway. "What is it?" Jackson asked. "That man getting out of the car. I recognize him from photos in my research. She turned to Jackson, her eyes wide. It's Robert Chandler. Jackson stared in disbelief. That's impossible. Robert died 3 years ago. Apparently not, Madeline whispered as the supposedly dead man strode up the manor steps. And I'm guessing his appearance here isn't a coincidence. Jackson's face hardened as the pieces fell into place. We've been played from the beginning. He reached for Madeline's hand. I need you to trust me. Whatever happens in there, remember that not everything is as it seems. As they walked toward the imposing front door, Madeline felt as though they were entering a trap that had been years in the making. What neither of them realized was that the true architect of this elaborate scheme was neither Robert Chandler nor Harold Matthews, but someone much closer to home, someone who had been watching their every move since that first accidental text message. The grand entrance hall of Pembroke's estate felt more like a theatre stage than a home, with its soaring ceilings and dramatic lighting. Lawrence Pembroke greeted them with uncharacteristic stiffness, leading them to a wood-panelled study where Victoria Matthews, her father Harold, Philip Bennett, and the supposedly deceased Robert Chandler waited. Jackson, Robert said, rising from his armchair. He looked older, greyer, but unmistakably alive. It's been a while. Jackson's face remained impassive, though Madeline felt his hand tense in hers. 3 years since your funeral, to be exact. Harold Matthews stepped forward, his imposing figure radiating satisfaction. Quite a shock, isn't it? Rather like watching your company's stock plummet without explanation. What exactly is happening here? Jackson asked, his voice dangerously calm. Justice, Victoria answered, her perfect smile brittle. Finally. Pembroke cleared his throat uncomfortably. I'll leave you to your discussion. This appears to be beyond the scope of our business arrangement. He nodded apologetically to Madeline before retreating, closing the heavy door behind him. Let me explain, Robert said, circling the room like a presenter. 3 years ago, I discovered something about Reed Technologies, about its founder, that would have destroyed the company. Rather than go public, I made a strategic retreat. You faked your death, Jackson stated flatly. With help. Robert nodded toward Harold. We've been planning this moment ever since. The moment we take back what you stole. I stole nothing, Jackson countered. Harold laughed coldly. Not just the company, Reed. You stole my daughter's future when you broke off your engagement without cause. Victoria stepped closer to Jackson. You humiliated me, after everything my family did for you. Madeline watched the scene unfold, pieces clicking into place. This was never about a hotel branding contract, was it? Clever girl. Harold smiled without warmth. The Claridge deal was bait. We needed Jackson in London, away from his support network. And what was I? Madeline asked. Just collateral damage? Philip Bennett adjusted his glasses nervously. Actually, you were the perfect distraction. Jackson's unlikely new friend. We knew he'd bring you along if he thought there was a business reason. A chill ran through Madeline. How could you possibly have known about me? We only met days ago through a wrong number text. She stopped abruptly, the impossible truth dawning on her face. There was no wrong number, Jackson said quietly, watching her expression. Was there, Philip? Philip looked away guiltily. You sent that text, Madeline whispered, turning to face Jackson. You deliberately contacted me, pretending it was an accident. The room fell silent as everyone awaited Jackson's response. Yes, he admitted, his grey eyes never leaving hers. I did. The betrayal hit Madeline like a physical blow. Why? Why involve me and my son in whatever this is? Before Jackson could answer, Robert interjected. Because he needed a sympathetic character in his story. Poor single mother, sick child, who wouldn't look like a hero helping them. Perfect rehabilitation for his image before we exposed the truth. What truth? Madeline demanded. Harold slid a file across the table. The real reason Jackson broke his engagement to Victoria. Not because of business disagreements, as the press was told, but because he discovered he couldn't father children. He kept it secret, of course. Image is everything to our friend here. Victoria's smile was venomous. He knew how much I wanted a family. Instead of being honest, he manufactured business conflicts as an excuse to end things. Then he buried himself in work, becoming the cold, isolated billionaire everyone now knows. Madeline looked at Jackson, whose face had gone pale. Is that true? Parts of it, he admitted, his voice strained. but not the way they're telling it. It doesn't matter now, Robert declared triumphantly. What matters is that in approximately 30 minutes, Reed Technologies will announce a massive security breach affecting millions of customers. The stock is already falling on rumors. By morning, the board will have no choice but to remove Jackson as CEO and install you in his place, Madeline guessed. With Matthew's hospitality as the majority shareholder, Harold added. Poetic justice, wouldn't you say? Throughout this exchange, Jackson had remained unnaturally calm. Now he checked his watch and smiled slightly. You're right about one thing, Robert. Timing is crucial. As if on cue, the door opened and two serious-looking men in suits entered. Mr. Matthews, Mr. Chandler, one said formally. I'm Agent Wilson with the Financial Crimes Unit. You're both under arrest for securities fraud and corporate espionage. Chaos erupted. Harold shouted about wrongful arrest. Robert lunged for his laptop. Victoria screamed accusations at Jackson. Within minutes, both men were handcuffed and being led from the room, along with a shell-shocked Philip. Victoria, Jackson said as she prepared to follow her father, I am sorry. Not for ending our engagement, but for how I handled it. You deserved better. She stared at him coldly. This isn't over, Jackson. When they were alone, Madeline turned to Jackson, her eyes demanding answers. You knew they were setting you up. You planned this countermove. Yes, my security team intercepted communications between Robert and Harold weeks ago. We've been gathering evidence of their conspiracy ever since. But what about me? Was I just part of your plan too? Her voice trembled slightly. Jackson stepped closer, taking her hands. No, that's where they miscalculated. The text to you truly was an accident. I don't believe you. Check your phone records. My number isn't even similar to your doctor's. It was genuine chance. His eyes held hers intently. But after we started talking, after I helped with Jake's treatment, Robert's team noticed. They thought they could use you against me. How convenient for your story, Madeline said, pulling her hands away. Madeline, listen to me. What Victoria said about why I ended our engagement, it's partially true. I did learn I couldn't have biological children. His voice roughened. But that wasn't why I ended things. I ended it because when I told Victoria, her first response was to suggest we use a donor and pass the child off as mine publicly to protect my image. Madeline's expression softened slightly. And that bothered you? It showed me she cared more about appearances than honesty, more about the Reed name than the person behind it. He paused. When I saw how fiercely you protected Jake, how your entire world revolved around his well-being rather than appearances or status, it affected me deeply. The drive back to London passed in thoughtful silence. By the time they reached the apartment, Jake was already asleep, Mrs. Winters reporting he'd had a wonderful day making scones and watching British cartoons. Madeline tucked the blanket around her sleeping son, then joined Jackson on the terrace overlooking the twinkling London skyline. What happens now? She asked quietly. The company will recover. Robert and Harold will face charges. He turned to her. But that's not what you're asking, is it? No. She met his gaze directly. What happens with us, Jackson? This world of corporate espionage and revenge plots, it's not one I want for Jake. Neither do I, he said simply. Meeting you and Jake, it changed my priorities, made me realize what I've been missing by putting business first. He reached for her hand. I don't want to lose that perspective, or you. I'm just a graphic designer from Boston. You're a billionaire CEO, and I'm just a man who accidentally texted a stranger and found something more valuable than any business deal. His eyes held a question. Would you and Jake consider staying in London a while longer? No hidden agendas, no corporate drama. Just us getting to know each other properly. As the city lights twinkled below them, Madeline thought about the strange path that had led them here. From a desperate text message to a hospital room to this moment of possibility. I think, she said slowly, a smile beginning to form, that Jake would never forgive me if we left before seeing the Tower of London. Jackson's answering smile was worth all the uncertainty they'd faced. Then that's where we'll start, tomorrow.